To quote Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'm back. But I was actually thinking this morning, the theme of this conference is on a sense of place and probably time as well. So I thought maybe to share a little story with you before I start with my presentation on what my father and mum used to tell me. I'm not always good with time management, so they told me the story when I started my first year at university about 4 students. And I've been teaching for students quite a long time now, so I know all the excuses if they miss a task or something. So apparently these 4 students went to, they had to write a test, and they missed the test for some reason. So they decided among themselves they're going to tell the lecturer that they, when they drove from their residence or wherever, they lived outside Stellenbosch, they had a flat tire and they had to change the tire, so they were late. So the lecturer didn't look too positive about the explanation, but he told them, okay, it's fine, you can come tomorrow and then you can write the test again. So the next day came and they came to write the test, and the first question they got when they had to write this test was this: which tire was flat? So that helped me quite a lot not to be late and on time at certain places. Okay, so I'm going to talk today to you about sulfur compounds that we've been working with quite a while now. We all know Chenin is important in South Africa as well as in France, and we also know that we get positive and negative sulfur compounds. I'm going to talk about that a bit later on. We also know, and we spoke about copper earlier, about copper usage in the vineyard. Obviously, copper can also be used in the cellar and has been used quite a long time now to mitigate some reductive flavors in wine. And interesting, there's been some new research the past 5-6 years has actually shown that where copper was added sometimes, the reductive sulfur compounds actually increases during bottle aging, which doesn't really make sense in terms of using copper. So that has been found in Spain as well as in Australia. And then sulfur research, or the occurrence of sulfur compounds, has mostly been studied if we think about white Sauvignon Blanc, quite a lot of research in France as well as in New Zealand, but not so much in Chenin. So we started with a research program on this a few years ago. Just a quick recap: what type of sulfur compounds do we get in wine? These are let's call them positive compounds, depending on your style of wine, obviously. If you don't want some of those flavor compounds that I've indicated there in your Chenin, then you probably don't want too much of these compounds, but in other styles of Chenin, you would like perhaps to have some of these. So the 3 main compounds are called varietal thiols, and the first one, 4-SMP, some of you maybe know it as 4-MMP. That's the new name, or the new way we refer to these compounds. We don't really find them in Chenin. We haven't really found a lot of them in our South African. So the first part of his study was to look at copper, adding copper to Chenin Blanc, and then also adding 2 reductive compounds to the wine, and see how these wines and the sensory characteristics of this wine develop over time. And then the second part of his work was to add a reductive compound, H2S, to wine, and see if you swirl the glass, and you all know that we tend to do this if a wine smells a bit reductive, what actually happens to those compounds inside the glass. And there we looked at varietal thiols and H2S. So the part 1, as I mentioned, we took a Chenin Blanc, and for this type of trials, we actually decided to take a Chenin Blanc with quite relatively high thiol levels. So it was a quite fruit-driven Chenin Blanc, quite a young wine. And you see we had 8 treatments there. We had one where we didn't add anything to the wine. We had one where we added copper. Then we also added methane thiol and copper, also without copper and methane thiol, and then basically adding H2S to the wine as well, H2S and copper. And then student doing some of the work. This was obviously during the time of COVID. Now, working with sulfur compounds can be quite challenging. They tend to stink or smell very nice. But the challenge with working with H2S, it's extremely volatile and very sensitive towards oxidation. So we actually had to design this box where the student could work with these compounds under a complete inert atmosphere where all the oxygen was removed from the box to make sure what you spike, what you add to the wine is actually actually ends up in the wine without being oxidized. So yeah, we used this box, and then you could see also developed this little system where we could measure the H2S in wine. This is also something you can actually measure in the cellar. It's not really difficult to do this, where nitrogen is just sparged through the wine, and the H2S is transformed into that. You could probably see in the beginning of that little video,